Hello, everyone. I'd like to talk to you about dialect. Some authors like to write in dialect, and I have got to be honest with you, I hate when they do that. Okay, I hate it. Why do I hate it? Well, dialect technically means a form of the language spoken in a specific region of the area of places that speak that language. So, for example, most people say water, okay, but I say water. Water is a dialect. It's different than the standard water. Dialect is hard to read. So, why is it hard to read? Well, it's hard to read because dialect isn't written in standard English. It's written in a more phonetic way, a way we haven't practiced reading since we were kids who were learning how to read. So, what does it look like? Well, first, listen to my terrible attempt at an accent reading this title. Written dialect. Okay, that was good, wasn't it? Right? Well, imagine if someone wrote me saying written dialect. Okay, it would look like that. And that's hard to read, right? So here's a pop quiz. What are two things Dracula loves? If you guessed blood and dialect, you're a star. But seriously, the book uses a good bit of dialect, so let's talk about how to read that. So back to my water example. Bram Stoker, if he heard my Pennsylvania Dutch pronunciation of water, would think I'm weird, and he would want to demonstrate my difference or weirdness in speaking by writing my words as they sound to him. So he would probably say or write, instead of she said water, he would write down she said water, water, water. Okay. Now, this isn't too hard to read for you because you're familiar with my dialect, you have the context, and it's just a single word. But it gets harder when it's a dialect you're not familiar with. And in the case of Dracula, you have to remember, Stoker himself speaks a different dialect of English than we do, right? He speaks British, okay? And he heard different dialects of English where he lives in Ireland and England than we do normally because he lives in a different country with different dialects during a different time. So, for example, no one in America would probably see this word as a dialectical form of myself. But can you kind of look at this and think, oh, that's someone saying myself? Yeah, you might get to. So let's talk about a character Stoker writes about in Dracula. Okay, there's the old man, and his name is Mr. Swales. Now, the research I've read said that people think Mr. Swales has a Yorkshire accent or he was possibly from Scotland. Okay, now the Yorkshire accent is said to be the British accent that has the most direct connection to Old English. Now, if you're not familiar with what Old English looks like or how it sounds, here's a picture. Can you read that? Probably not. Okay, but you can kind of get some of the sound by just trying to go through it. Okay, hey, but here's a little question for you. Can you find the word queen in there? See if you can. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Did you find it? Here it is. Queen. Now, when you read Dialect in Dracula, I want you to remember a couple of things. First, reading dialect is like translating from a different language, okay? And when you think of that, just remember, you don't necessarily, if someone says to me, wie geht's in German, okay, I don't necessarily translate it to be how going it, right? We translate it to be like, how are you, okay? So reading dialect is translating. Okay. Second, some of the things that people are saying, we literally have no idea what they mean. Like scholars of Dracula, the book, don't even know what the people are saying in the book sometimes. Okay. So that's what happens when you read a book from another time, another era, right? Okay, so just remember that when time passes, sometimes you just can't translate. Okay, you've also got to remember the context of the passage. So, what happened in the passage right before the dialect piece? What's the current mood of the story, right? Use all those clues to help you figure out what you're doing, because you're simply getting the gist. Okay, you're not, like I said earlier, doing a direct translation. And finally, here's the biggest tip. When you read dialect, read it out loud, because then you can hear the accent. And words on paper don't translate as accents as good as actual sounds translate accents. Okay, so are you ready to try? I think so. I think we can try this out. Now, first, let me tell you not to worry, because this is a quote from the book From Mina. Even Mina says she cannot quite understand his dialect. Okay, so Stoker helps us by giving us some hints here and there. All right, see, she tells us this has something to do with the church. Remember, we're using our context. They're at a church sitting looking at the graveyard. So that should help us with the next passage. Okay, I'm going to underline some words here that are tough to understand if we simply read with our eyes. Okay, so let's try to get the gist of it while reading it aloud. Remember, a lot of these words are older words we wouldn't know, like bairns. Okay, bairns is a Scottish word and it means babies or children. Okay, so that's not written in dialect, so just remember some of these are words we wouldn't even know. Okay, so let's move through it. It be all full talk, lock, stock, and barrel. That's what it be, and naught else. These bands and wafts and bugos and bargas and boggles and all in it, them is only fit to set bairns and dizzy wizen a bellerin. They be naught but all airbleebs. They and all grims and signs and warnin's be all invented by persons and ilsome buke bodies and railway touters to scare and scunner halflins and to get folks to do something that they don't other incline to. Okay, so maybe you heard me say and not else, and then down later here they also say they be not. Okay, so maybe you got from that I said the word and not. Not is Naught. Hopefully I spelled that right. Okay. And not else, where today we would either say and not else or and nothing else. Okay. And maybe you also heard and boo ghosts, which you probably like, oh, he was just saying like ghosts and boo ghosts, right? Okay. And all of the rest of the words. I'm not going to read them all because I don't want to bore you. Okay. But did that help you? Did you get that he's talking about how it's foolish talk to talk about ghosts and scary things? Because he's in the graveyard, right? I hope so. Now, let's have you try it, okay? Get the gist from this passage. I'm going to give you some time to read. Pause if you need to. Okay, here's the gist of that. The gist is you'll have time to be scared when the tombstones run away and this graveyard is empty. There's the clock chiming. I must go. I used my reading aloud to get words like scared and going. And I used the context clues of the graveyard we read about before and the line, and off he hobbled, to tell me he was talking about tombstones and that he then left. Okay? And I must goin'. Okay? You did it. Or if you didn't quite do it, and that's okay, at least you're on your way to doing it. Keep practicing, remember the tips, and enjoy reading dialect.